सेव किया था ना?
मैं सिर्फ इसलिए गया था क्योंकि उसने मुझे कॉल किया, that's it. But listen तो.
Save it for someone else.
जिंदगी में सेव करना जरूरी है, मगर जब बात पैसों की हो, सिर्फ सेविंग से काम नहीं चलेगा। इक्विटी म्यूचुअल फंड्स में इन्वेस्ट कीजिए और अपने सेविंग्स को आगे बढ़ने का मौका दीजिए।
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme-related documents carefully.
Entering the ancient city of Khara in 1886, as he traversed the great desert trade route through Balochistan, the colonial civil servant George Tate observed two pillars guarding the path. Inside, he was told, were two men who had been tied to the stake and entombed alive. These men had been the owners of a couple of exceedingly fine asses which were coveted by the chieftain of their tribe, Tate wrote. The men tried to flee with their prize asses, but were caught. The chief had been rather lenient with them, local residents told Tate, since just before the pillars were completed over their heads, each of these misguided men who had dared to assert their right to own their own property had been stunned by a blow from an axe handle. Last week, alleged Islamic State jihadists savagely struck in Balochistan's Mastung district, killing at least 55 people at a procession to mark the birthday of the Prophet Muhammad. Although there have been several massacres of the Shia minority in Pakistan by the Islamic State, jihadists have become increasingly aggressive in their opposition to folk religious traditions like the Barelvis who were participating in that procession. Even though the growing power of the Islamic State in Balochistan is drawing global attention, the process enabling this dangerous sunrise isn't. The crude state structures built in the colonial period and reinforced by the Pakistan army are disintegrating. And that's enabling jihadists, narcotics traffickers, and organized crime cartels to step into the vacuum. Enfeebled by economic implosion and political crisis, the Pakistani state no longer has the resources to push back. The bombing in Mastung does, of course, have something to do with theology. Taliban chief Mullah Hebatullah Akhundzada is a member of the Saifis, a Sufi order with a significant following in Afghanistan. The killing, however, is also part of a broader effort to intimidate ethnic Pashtun communities and leadership across Balochistan. Earlier this summer, the ethnic Pashtun politician Mohsin Dawar voiced concern about the growing power of jihadist death squads which were targeting the fundamental institutions of society in the region. Local leaders, Dawar said, were being targeted for assassination while businesses and industries were being extorted. People are abducted, tortured, and a video of theirs is recorded and posted online, he said. Everyone watched the birth of the Islamic State in Pakistan. Some cheering, some silent. 50 men with weapons dragged 3 women out of their homes and paraded them naked through the streets of a village near Lahore in 2009. Human rights investigators reported that the women's faces were blackened with ink and, I quote, children were instructed to degrade them by poking them with sticks. Once the police arrived, the women were arrested and booked for prostitution. Led by the local Islamist leader Intizarul Haq, Punjab's Lashkar-e-Jhangvi had begun to demonstrate that it, not the Pakistani state, ruled the heartland. Local politicians lined up behind the flanks of the fundamentalists. In 1984, a then obscure cleric, Maulana Haq Nawaz Jhangvi, founded the Anjuman-e-Sipah-e-Sahiba Pakistan in the Punjab town of Jhang. Fired by General Ziaul Haq's Islamizing project, the Anjuman was one of several organizations seeking to rebuild Pakistan on theocratic lines. The Anjuman's armed wing, the Lashkar-e-Jhangvi, targeted Shia mosques and communities as well as police. Following an attempt to assassinate Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif in 1999, authorities finally clamped down on the Lashkar-e-Jhangvi. Its leadership took refuge in Taliban-ruled Afghanistan. only to return home after 9/11 when General Pervez Musharraf's regime misguidedly provided a homecoming for Pakistani jihadists. Elements of the Lashkar-e-Jhangvi as well as other ethnic Punjabi jihadist groups later embedded themselves in Taliban-linked movements across Pakistan's northwest. The scholar Kandil Siddiqui has recorded that by 2009, the Pakistani Taliban had taken control of police stations in areas like Matta, Maidan and Kalam, and even ran parallel police forces of their own. Women were jailed for working alongside men and girls' schools were blown up. The state did nothing. Finally pushed to confront the Taliban by rising levels of violence against the army, Pakistan went to war in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa province. The Taliban predictably slipped back across the border into Afghanistan, helped by their own Taliban allies. For a time, the generals in Rawalpindi congratulated themselves, imagining their Taliban clients would keep things quiet. This self-congratulation was to be a very bad miscalculation. For generations, we know from the account of colonial officials like Tate, bandit raids across the Afghan-Baloch border were a feature of life. Tate's fascinating stories include the tale of two bandits shot dead by border guards in 1899, who were given a rough and ready burial in the sand. The sand, though, served to plug the wounds on the shoulder of the second bandit. Later recovering, the man climbed out of his grave and was rescued by travelers. Every Baloch in camp probably gave him a feed, Tate recorded, and for a time he was quite the lion of the place. The profession of a freebooter was one in which a man of long and honorable pedigree might engage, he observed. Petty theft was regarded as utterly vile. This particular bandit, of course, decided he tested his luck enough and gave up raiding for a life as a farmer. But economic historian Tirthankar Roy's path-breaking work on Afghanistan has shown that this kind of violence was fated by circumstance and almost institutionalized. As economic power shifted to the great port cities of Asia, the trade routes that ran through the Afghan-Persian borderlands, places like Balochistan and Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, became irrelevant. The new colonial powers saw little reason to invest in regions like the borderland, which were too resource poor to justify constructing roads or railway lines linking them to the ports. Like in the European peripheries, documented by the great historian Eric Hobsbawm, banditry flourished as a way of life. It meant not just harvesting economic resources by theft, but also a means of resisting central authority and unjust local power brokers. The generation of young jihadists who had returned from Afghanistan after 9/11 notably came from poor backgrounds, scholar Farhad Taj has noted. Backgrounds that were very distinct from the tribal elites who had controlled political life in the Pashtun heartlands. Armed with a little bit of education and empowered by their Kalashnikov, they sought to remake the region in their own image, to turn it into a kind of Afghanistan. Long before the triumph of the Taliban in Kabul, experts like Paul Lushenko had remarked on the ability of the Islamic State to regenerate itself from apparently crushing defeats. The reasons are pretty simple. Elements in the jihadist rank and file denied what they considered a fair share of power by regional Taliban commanders or cut out of the narcotics and illegal mining syndicates, simply rebranded themselves as the Islamic State. Even though the links between these groups and the central Islamic State in Iraq were pretty tenuous, the brand had a draw of its own. For its part, journalist Ziaur Rahman notes, the Lashkar-e-Jhangvi survived by fluidly allying itself with other jihadist organizations, among them Al-Qaeda, which was of course the Islamic State's key rival in the Middle East. Lashkar-e Jhangvi cadre attacked the police training college in Quetta in 2006, killing 61 cadets. Later, a suicide bomber targeted the shrine of the Sufi saint Shah Nurani in Khusda district, leaving 52 dead. And branded as the Islamic State, the same Lashkar-e Jhangvi also carried out a bombing at an election rally in 2018 where at least 128 people, including the prominent local politician Siraj Rezani, were killed. The Pakistan Army's long and bloody operation to evict jihadists from the ethnic Pashtun belt had for all practical purposes resulted in nothing. Last month, a video emerged showing Tehreek-e-Taliban chief Noor Wali Mehsood personally commanding operations against Pakistani forces in Chitral. Large-scale attacks have taken place in Balochistan too, and almost everywhere the Pakistan Army has proved unable to hit back. Fears are mounting that the rising tide of jihadism could spread to Central Asia. That's a prospect that is likely provoking some wry smiles in Washington as regional powers China and Iran both fueled the Taliban campaign to evict the United States from Afghanistan. As commentator Farhan Siddiqui has argued, a durable solution needs not just a military response, but a whole-of-government solution which addresses long-standing fault lines of class, ethnicity and religion. The problem is the Pakistani state has neither the resources nor the political will to implement it. A long period of destabilizing crisis looms ahead. I'm Praveen Swami and I'm National Security Editor of ThePrint. Thank you for watching Security Code.